Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. My name is Elijah and I'm an app developer at Medic. While the webinar is about testing, we'll start off by zooming out and considering the overall concept of app quality. And app quality can be defined as a measure of how well an application complies with functional and non-functional requirements. Functional requirements are the specific end user requirements. So for example, in an ANC workflow, the users would expect to have something like a pregnancy registration form, a delivery form, and so on and so forth. So in the CHT context, the functional pieces are specific workflow-oriented bits and pieces of the application. So things like forms, tasks, targets, etc. For non-functional requirements, these are the implied needs that make the app usable. So things like reliability, the security of the application, scalability, and even maintainability. CHT apps are relied upon by health workers, and technical failures easily translate to clinical outcomes. So high quality apps are very important and they save lives. So how can we maintain app quality? There are two main methods of maintaining app quality. We have quality assurance and quality control. So for quality assurance, these are processes that ensure the product meets quality standards. And the quality standards have to be defined as benchmark requirements, which are then maintained through quality processes and procedures. So for the CHT, we have these components that have been defined. We have a style guide, we have the development workflow, and we also have static code analysis tools that are recommended to be used in the CHT ecosystem. So these help to maintain a set of standards that can be relied upon by developers of CHT applications and also users of the apps that are produced using the CHT to be able to ensure that the workflows they work on are performing according to the requirements that are specified. As for quality control, it is a subset of the QA process, which is aimed at proactively identifying defects within the application. So for quality control measures, we have code reviews. This is where the output of the software development process is verified by another developer to make sure that any opportunities for improvement can be quickly identified and the application can be iterated on to produce a higher quality output. And then we also have testing. Testing can be done by humans. So that is what we have as manual testing. And also testing can be done via an automation framework. So we'll be considering automated testing for this webinar. So for the two categories of testing, they are not mutually exclusive. Although relying on one category, especially considering the normal human-oriented workflow process where you start off by manual testing, and then if the opportunity avails itself, you can move on to automated testing. It is very easy to forget to move to the automated testing. So we can compare the two types of testing through various perspectives, including speed, reliability, maintenance, usability, scope, cost, and the skill set involved. So we'll quickly go through each one of these items to review the needs for the two categories. Starting off with speed, manual testing tends to be a bit slower compared to automated testing because automated testing is done by machines. For reliability, manual testing is very much prone to human error. So there can be transcription errors, there can be errors when setting up the test cases, and so many other mistakes can be made along the process. But for automated testing, it is less prone to human error, and the test cases, when defined, they tend to stay fixed. When it comes to maintainability, manual testing requires more effort compared to automated testing, because in our organizations, we have staff transitions, we have different project contexts, and so many changes that happen. So maintaining a manual testing regimen becomes a bit difficult to sustain. For reusability, manual testing, you can have procedures laid out that can be reused, but during the process of manual execution, it depends on the individual doing the actual testing. So there tends to be an opportunity for variation in that step. But for automated testing, everything happens according to the way the code is laid out. In terms of scope, manual testing tends to be limited in scope. We have fixed working hours for most organizations, and people tend to do the most conventional tasks that are laid out in front of them. But for automated testing, it's very easy to have various types of test cases which take into account edge cases or abnormal data or even connection interruptions, things like those. So when we look at both categories in terms of cost, manual testing tends to have lower upfront cost, as you have, even in the initial stages, access to the developer of the workflow. So for most organizations, one developer creates the workflow, and then another developer code reviews the workflow and also does testing. And in that way, costs are lowered. But the main limitation with manual testing is it does not scale very well. For automated testing, there is a bit of a higher upfront cost. You need to sit down and intentionally write out the test cases and make sure that all scenarios are covered. But over time, that investment pays for itself, and you tend to find that maintaining the quality of the app over time becomes easier. In terms of skill set, manual testing requires a tester with manual testing skills. So this implies a need for training, and also the tester needs to understand the application being tested. So it might take a bit of a time before a tester can start to become productive while working with the application. For automated testing, as long as the producer, the creator of the tests, has technical knowledge to be able to write out the test scenarios, then they can be created, and it's way easier to maintain. When it comes to testing CHT applications, unit testing is supported out of the box via language features. The main language that is used to develop CHT applications is JavaScript, so you can write out test case scenarios using JavaScript language. And then we also have the CHT test harness for CHT domain components. So things like forms, tasks, targets, and contact summary. Next slide. So a bit more about the CHT test harness. It is an open source package, and the source code is freely available on GitHub on that address. And then the documentation is also on the CHT documentation site. So after this webinar is over, you can visit the documentation, read up more about it, and feel free to also engage on the CHT forum in case you have questions or feedback. So we'll now jump over into examples of test scenarios. So a bit more background on the test scenarios. We'll be covering the typical ANC workflow, where we have pregnancy registration forms, and also ANC reminders for the mother to check in. And then once the tasks have been actioned, then the task should resolve. So this is a schematic representation of the workflow. And I'll now invite Paul to present on this.
I'm Paul. I'm based in Lomé, Togo, and I'm app service developer at Medic. So when it comes to writing tests to CHT apps, it requires a good understanding of your project workflows and all the requirements that it needs. So before beginning to test a CHT app, you need to have some things that need to be set up first. To begin with, you need to have a functioning CHT instance with a CHT-conf installed locally and the project folder also set up. And also, you need to make sure that your package.json file does have some required dependencies that are needed for the harness to be run. And if these dependencies are not present, you can just install them by doing npm install and adding them CHT complete harness, Chai, and Mocha. After that, once you got these dependencies installed, we can begin to add some scripts command right away into your package.json so that you won't be at each time, writing these instruction when you want to test all the forms and all the tags and all of the different components that you have in your CHT application. So this is a very good shortcut so that you can use it whenever you want, even in different step CI/CD and other stuff. So after that all is set up, we can now begin to think about the project itself, the folder, the organization we want to have to a test. And we can start by creating a test folder or any name that you want, but just make sure that it is, according to what you put in your script commands, because the script command will be running the test in a given folder. So the name that you wanted to name your folder should be aligned with what you put there. And once you did that, you can then create a harness defaults JSON at the root of your project. This is actually a default configuration file for the harness that contains the default user, the subject, the different contacts that can be preloaded and used during the test, and also some preloaded reports and different settings. We can have more details about that on the link that will be provided. Okay, so now we can begin to enter in the depth of the subject. In as a harness test file, we have some imported section. The first is we need first to import the test runner class, the harness class, and then we need to instantiate the harness itself an object of that class, and then we can begin to set these up, like set it whenever we want to have some more logs during the test running, some detailed log, or whenever we wanted the harness actually to be running in a browser, like opening a GUI, so we can see how the form is being submitted, and it can be very helpful in when we are having some error or debugging. Okay, but one of our common naming pattern while testing CHT application is to name the file in this kind of pattern file name .spec.js, so that all these kind of file with this specific extension could be referred in our scripts or in the different tools we are using to run the test. So now we are going to have some demo. on how we are going to, we use to test, different component of a CHT app using the test harness. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is just to come to take some second here to explain what I was talking about when talking about the folder that needed to be set up when we need to create, when we need to organize our tests. Here in this case, in our project here, we have the CHT app that is well set with all the project well set. And then we create a folder here named test that should be containing our different tests. And then we organize it in the way that should be, reflecting the different components that we have in our app. We have a folder for forms, we have a folder for tags, we have a folder for contact summary. We can have in other form, there's also like targets and different components that we wanted to test in our app. So to begin with, we'll be looking at this test pregnancy.spec.js test file. We can notice that we are here, the name is pregnancy.spec.js. So we are now focusing on the pregnancy form. So we wanted to test this form. Okay, so to test a form, we have to understand how, like we said, how the workflows works and how do we need to go within to do while testing. So we have two steps. The first steps is to begin to fill the form. Like if we wanted to do it manually, we'll be testing the form by filling it, by having in mind different scenarios. Maybe I want to test danger signs. Maybe I want to test a safe pregnancy. And I will have all these kind of, scenarios on my mind, and I will be filling the form accordingly. So we are here filling the pregnancy form with a kind of scenario. So we'll be going deep into that. So after that, we'll be checking if the form is, have been filled well and we don't have any error. And we can also go further by checking the report that will be generated by when this form will be submitted, by checking some field, some output that will assure that the input we have set in the form are reflecting in the report that is being generated. Okay, so now let's come back to the input. So the input we are talking about is just the answer. So to get a context of that, let's move to our form XLS to understand a bit how this input works. So here is the pregnancy form, and we'll be just, be touching the different group and, pointing out the different inputs, how we set it. So here we need to understand that each group, it depends on the way we want it to be displayed, could be displayed as a page. So each page will result in a set of inputs. So let's take this first group. Here, register method, this is a group, and we have a node, this is not an input, and then we have a selection when we need to select the LMP method, and this is the end of the group. So it results in just one input in this page. And we have another group here. It have a date. It also, oh, come on, here. I mean, okay, so we have also a date here, and it's also one input for this page. And we have also another group with, come on, 1, 2, 3 input. So this is to understand how we should be formatting the different input that will be, sent into the harness to be filled. Okay, so I'm just going to get the input right here so that we can see it more clearly. Yeah, sure. So I'll be having the input. It is it is a best practice to have all the input in a separate file, because the input can be used in different tests. So if you have it in a different file, you can, just call them from this file in the remaining tests that will be needing this input. So here we are willing to fill the pregnancy form with a kind of scenario of a danger scenario, like we want to be filling the form by saying that here we have some danger signs, and we should have this reflected in the report. Okay, so the name of the form is pregnancy, and here you can see that the scenario we are testing is danger. Okay, so like we said, the first group was about the LMP method, and it has have one input, one answer. This is for the first page. Exactly for the second page, exactly for the third page, like we saw here, we can see that we have 1, 2, also 1, and here we have it could also depend on the different workflows. Like if a condition is displayed, we need to skip a group to enter another group, and we should have all these scenario well registered here in the input for in the input file, so that we can use it here. Okay, so once we have that field, we should be waiting for our form to be, submitted without any error, and having some specific, specific output here. Okay, let me check something quickly. Here we have I just wanted to check something here. Okay, so here we are. So we have these two different output in the report that will be generated, having years and the date that we have set here in the input file, like in the different answer. And we wanted, this is obvious, when this form should be submitted, we should see all that we have input here here in the report, and we are testing it. So let's get it a run and see if all does work well. So for a bit of context, while waiting for this to run, actually it has run, and it is showing that the pregnancy with pregnancy and danger sign followers dates has run, and the test that is completed successfully. So we just have one test here, and then it has completed. So to give a bit of context here, I am using a tool that is called Mocha Sidebar, and here it is. This is an extension of VS Code. This is one that has given me the opportunity, to run the test right here from the code without needing to come in the console to maybe do some npm run test. Okay, so it also gives some more flexibility that we'll be seeing when we be moving forward. So here is the first step, and why we show how to fill a form, and what is the flow when we want to test the form. First, fill the form. Second, check if the form submitted well, no error, and then check some the combination of the output field that we are willing to see in the report. Okay, so before going ahead, I just wanted to show a case where we could have some error while filling a form, and how we can just get it fixed quickly. Okay, so let me just say that we forget, or maybe we add another answer here, and by error we forget that this page is only waiting for one input, but we forgot, and then we add another one. Okay, so how can we get it fixed? First, let's run the test and see that what is coming. We are just saying that the test while running encountered an error while filling the form, and it is saying that we are attempting to fill 2 questions, but only 1 are visible, and it's also indexing the answers that we will be sending to the form. Okay, so we can just see it here. Oh, okay, so here in this page, we are sending two response. And it is say in that the only one question is visible, but here we are sending two answers. Why? We can quickly jump up in the form and see, okay, so here we are in this group, in this page, and oh, this is a node, it's not, an input. So we just have one input, it is a select, and we can just verify about the select. Okay, so this is what we wanted to do, and we can just clear it here to have the test run successfully. And we can come back here and see that it is running without no more issue. So I'll just make a pause here and maybe have some feedback from you and know how you guys used to test your form while working on your CHT application.
Hi, Paul, I had a question. First, thanks a lot for the demo and also I think for the useful VS Code extension. So my question was revolving around the issue with the packages that are being installed. The first time I was running tests, I realized that Mocha, Kai, and CHT Conf and Nest, like it's a sort of mix and match to just find the correct versions that work together. So I wanted you to address that and maybe if that has been improved on. And then the second is I saw when you're testing your forms, you were referring to forms names as just the literal names. So I was wondering, since things like forms are used all across the app, like is there a standard for like sort of having references for these forms, like the names of the forms, that is? So for example, instead of just referring to your form directly as pregnancy and then probably it changes elsewhere and then that breaks things. So I was wondering what are the standards that have been put in place and what would you advise for the same? I think those are the only two questions I have for now. Yeah.
Thanks. Yes. So I'll be coming back here. Thanks for your question. And for the first question about the package version, yes, we have some, I don't know at which time you test it, but you could give it another try and see if it resolved, because we have, some updates of all these packages during the time. And if you have some issue about that, you can just raise it on our forum so that we can help you fix it quickly. And yes, for the second question, this is very interesting because we have multiple way of doing that. And as you can see, I have gone ahead about I was talking about the form input to have, since these inputs can be used in different, test case or even form test case, we can have all of them, set up in a file and then call them from there. We can do the same for also the tax name, the form's name, and have a common, a common file that will be declaring all these form name as a variable that will be used. Let's say, let's say something like this, just to be showing you. You can have something like this, okay, and saying that pregnancy, and then put pregnancy, and then we can use it, anywhere you want after, and add the different forms that we have. And it can also, so you have the liberty to put it whatever you want. And as you can see, since this form can be used in different SKs, it's a good practice to have it one place so that you can just reference it from there. And yes, this is a very good question, and this is how we kind of, use to do it. But for this demo, just to keep it simple and put all things, so that we wouldn't be jumping too much, we just set it this way. Thanks. I don't know if there is another question. Back to you, Niraj.
Thanks, Paul. Just to understand the question correctly, Franklin, you mentioned that you had some difficulty figuring out the version itself, right, for the test harness. How was your experience, and then how were you able to resolve it? Is it somewhere like in the forum or anything?
Yeah, so my challenge was, I realized, because I was just using that command for the npm install, it installed all latest versions of things, but then now they will not run. And so there's just a lot of errors that I kept on getting. So what I did was I just looked into an example project that had been done within the accelerator, and then I got to see that actually the dependencies were the issue, and so I just lifted that and restricted the installation to those particular version of dependencies. Yeah, and then something else I think I noticed was that some later versions don't have some of the functionalities that I used for testing. So yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head which ones were they, but I realized that some of the functions they're sort of deprecated in the higher versions. So I think that also will be, but that is a conversation for another day, because if then we're supposed to be upgrading, it means that some of the tests, the functions will be deprecated, and maybe that will also bring issues. Yeah, but thanks either way. I think my question has been answered. Yeah, and just to ask another one, I'm not sure whether I'm asking before a presentation, but also add issues when we are dealing with multiple hierarchies, and how does then the harness.defaults.json look like? Yeah, so you can advise whether that's something to be covered next, or it's something that maybe it's a valid question for now. Yeah. Also, and then maybe I will clarify further the question if it's relevant for now or later.
Yeah, great questions, Franklin. Before we get into the multiple hierarchies, I just wanted to mention a bit more about the software compatibility matrix when it comes to the harness. So whenever a new version of the harness is released, there's usually an accompanying announcement that is made on the CHT forum. I've shared an example in the chat. So in that post, there is a detailed description of the various versions of CHT core that are compatible with the new release, and it's very useful as a guide when you're trying out your applications. And also, when installing dependencies, sometimes it's important to use npm CI rather than just npm install, so that you can install the specific versions that are applicable for that version. And as always, feel free to post on the forum if you have a question, if something doesn't behave as you expect, and then we can all jump in and assist. Paul, over to you for harness defaults. I can see you're there already.
Thanks. So to come back on this great question. Okay. So this is the harness default JSON file for this demo. And we were talking about its structure. So it has the default user and the subject. So the subject is the one on which profile we are acting. So when we are filling the pregnancy form, we are filling it on the subject profile. So it needed to have the right, to be at the right place, and to have the right definition, so that the form could be visible or could be filled on its profile. And this also is the same with the user. So let's say we have two kind of user, a supervisor and a simple CW, which will be having another doc here, okay, that will have some kind of the structure, but will have a different kind of role, okay, if your app does support this kind of architecture, so that you can have it referenced when you'll be using a test case that is just to be run in case of that is relevant for a supervisor. So to do that, you can just change the user or change the subject. By default, we set it to user to be the CHW user, and by default, the subject to be a patient. It can change. We can have a subject to be a village if you want to fill a form on a village or a VHT profile. We can have also the user to be a supervisor. But all these needed to be set here so that we can use it elsewhere, in the tax by setting it at different place. Just for the last example, we can be filling the form here, and since we by default we set the harness to be using user as patient ID and user as CHW and patient subject as patient ID, this will be the one that we'll be using to fill the form. So the pregnancy form is filled on the subject, which is the patient, also the patient profile page. And then let's say that the task should normally be being shown on the supervisor profile. So to do that, we'll need to change the current user, okay, by setting it to supervisor ID, but just to make sure that we have it set in the harness by setting a doc and having the doc, you see, ID to be supervisor ID. And then from there, the harness will just, okay, position itself as on the supervisor profile, and then fetch for the task that should be, visible from this profile. So this is it. And we have more, details about that on our documentation, and this could be shared very soon.
Yeah, just a comment. Thanks, Paul, a lot for that technique. My experience with it was because I didn't find any clear doc on it. So I think I just ended up creating multiple defaults file, and then just when instantiating the harness, gave it the parameter for harness data path to point to another default.json. I think this is more brilliant, really. And so thanks for that. Yeah. No more questions from my end.
So let's get into testing tasks. So testing tasks could be really, really, really tedious because you have to become a time traveler. Travel in the past, travel in the future, come back in the present tense, adding some days to your calendar, and sometimes you can even forget about that and miss your meeting. So the harness comes to your help by having these, features in built in. Okay, so to be able to do that, because the text very talk about time and yeah, much time, and I will be highlight in different method or function that are used to handle this kind of stuff. So the first one is set now. Okay, so set now is a method that is used to actually set the current mock time of the harness. Okay, and then we have also flush. So flush is used to increment the current time by an amount of the amount of time. It is very useful if you want to travel to the future. Okay, and we have also get task, which is actually used to get the tags that are visible, and again on the current user that is set, like we talked about it before. And also we have this important function that is called load action. Okay, this is used actually to simulate the user opening an action form. Like in this form, in this test, we are going to test a pregnancy registration form triggering a pregnancy home visit tax after some time. Okay, so we have two types of form here: the form that is triggering the action, and the form that is open when the action, the tax is triggered. Okay, so we should be using we should be having also scenarios for these different forms, and then we should be using load action to load the inputs into the form that has been actioned by the tax. Okay, so let's go in deep. So we have splitted this task. Actually, can be done in one test case, but we just splitted it so that we can have more detail. So the first test case is just testing if after a pregnancy form field, we have the pregnancy home visit tax trigger in the different, sets of dates that the current design or the workflows, the requirements define. So all these depend on your design, on your workflow, on the requirements. So if it said it should be triggered after 5 days, after 30 days, so you have to write your tax on that. And then here in the test, while testing, you will be waiting for the task to be triggered at that very day. So this is what we'll be doing here. So we have our own function this is just a util function to get the different days that we are waiting for our very task to be triggered. And then we are just checking for those days. If these days we are waiting for a pregnancy home visit tax to be, triggered, we should have it when we load the tax, the pregnancy home visit tax. We should have, okay, one tax. Actually, this is the sentence to check it. And like Franklin said it, we can have this, literal, like this thing that is hard-coded reference in 5, and then use it here to get all things, to get put at one place and then use it afterward. So this is what we are doing. So if the day is not suitable for a pregnancy home visit, we should not have a tax from home visit. It should be empty. So we can see the different step: filling the source form, and then waiting for the tax, the action form that should be triggered to be triggered in the given condition. So this is the first step. Let's get it a run to see how it works. So yeah, actually it's working great because we have the good inputs for the scenario. Okay, we have all that is needed to be shown, and to have the form field, and all is okay. Okay, and let's say let's see something. Just before going ahead, I just want to give also a test here. Let's say that instead of adding a date here, okay, we just set this yes or no, okay, because I've used yes last time. So let's see how this will behave and see how it will behave, of course. So let's give it a test and see. So first of all, we are looking at the error. We can see that we have an error here. Please enter the start date of the LMP. So actually field is required, but it seems that it does not provide the required field. And we can see this error here, and like we found last time, we can just go back and fix it by adding an an adequate value here. And what I was going to show, we will get it in details in the next test case when we'll be filling the tax form itself. Okay, so let's get into it before we have some pause for a question. So we have tested that actually our form is the pregnancy home visit tax is showing. Okay, and now the next requirement is that whenever the pregnancy home visit tax, we have a form that is submitted, the form that issue trigger is submitted, we shouldn't have any tax again on the user profile. So this is what the test is doing. So to do so, we're going to be doing the same thing that we did in the last test, okay, by trying to get the tax to be available. We are filling the pregnancy registration form, and then setting the current mock time, and then we are loading the tags. We are getting the tags that are visible and then loading the action form. So this is the very important step. Now we are loading the form. So since the tags has been defined already, we know CHT knows which form to trigger. Okay, so it will be triggering this form by putting that input right in there. Okay, so if you go to the input here in my input file, I have just set it, keep it simple here by having the scenario, pregnancy home visit scenario, and just one specific scenario when the safe is the pregnancy visit home visit were safe, and then we should have no facility visit. And let's have it tested, okay, to see how is it doing. Sure. Okay, so to give him time to complete. And oh, I forgot, I have breakpoint here. So it is running it. Okay, so pregnancy home visit should result after submitting the form. So we can see that it works. But what if it does not work? This is what is interesting. So we needed to find out why in some case when the task does not resolve, what is the error. Okay, so to do so, I will be just doing something here by, let's say, I will be forgetting to add here, or just take it here and then test it again. I just want to share something here. Okay, and good. So we can see that we have an error, and here this is a bit ambiguous, because we cannot just by reading here just know where is the issue. Okay, so here come the breakpoints to see what is happening. So by the error, we can definitely know that it is a form filling error. So we can have the breakpoint set at here, just after the first form field, and also here after the action has been loaded. Let's say here, okay? And then let's give in a try again to see how we can get resolved. Okay, so when running it for the second time, we can see the breakpoint output here. We have the pregnancy, okay, and we have one error here. The first error, it says that we have, okay, this field. So the error is with the pregnancy registration input. Let's get it fixed and then go back. Okay, so this is done. Okay, let's give it a test again. Good, so we have no more error. Okay, we have no more error. And if we move to the second breakpoint, we shouldn't have no more error also. This is the follow-on form result. We have no error. And yes, so all things goes well. So this is a very good tool that can help you quickly debug and see the flow, what is the values, and what is the actually the current values or the different variable, the different object you have, and help you quickly get yourself out of the issue. So I will pause here also, and if you have any feedback or any question, or if you have a different way of testing your task, it will be really appreciated to have your feedback on that. Thanks.
Well, thanks. It's Martin. I was just wondering about batch processing of tests. If you have a range that you want to test, say, of a numerical value, have you what about have you tried sort of some cron job type approach or batch job approach?
So for batch processing of scenarios, we have cases like ANC visits, which tend to happen over a period of time, and they are similar in nature. It's only the timing between the visits that is different. So the way we normally handle those scenarios is having a loop, and then using the time travel technique demonstrated by Paul, we feed the various time windows, and then each of the tests runs now for that specific scenario. So I'm not really sure if that covers the use case that you had in mind, Martin. And maybe we can continue this conversation in the forum because we are out of time.
Well, yeah, no, that sounds great, Elijah. Yes, so I think partially it does, but you're right. Let's try and cover it in the next session. Perfect.
Okay.